Do alien saucers crash in the United States?
It didn't look like an airplane, didn't look like a missile.
Do alien probes come down in Siberia?
Unlike most UFO cases, this one should be and can be resolved.
Do alien craft land in England?
I observed the craft probably for about 15 minutes on the ground.
Does the US government have proof of alien life? The United States, June 1947. A private pilot near Mount Rainier. He's the first to see unusual craft traveling at hitherto unknown speeds. Hundreds of reports of flying discs follow. Half a century later, the greatest mystery is solved.
Many people were told to keep their mouth shut about the things they saw.
A lot of us were still in shock and in disbelief what we found.
The true story is yet to be told.
I believe that there was a flying out of space object.
An alien saucer crash. The crew lies dying. The military cover it up. In the two museums at Roswell, New Mexico, the truth is on show. We are not alone. We can see for ourselves. We are the first to learn the government's biggest secret. And if they say it's not true, well, they would, wouldn't they? Encounters with extraterrestrials, abductions, reports of spaceships. Over the last 50 years, these are multiplying to industrial proportions. Not mere childish gullibility, but a genuine hunger to know if there is something outside ourselves fuels our curiosity. Is there life elsewhere? And does it visit us? The incident at Roswell is the most crucial case of all time for UFO believers. If the truth were out in the open, they say, it would provide the answers. No other case is heading so clearly to become a myth. No other case gathers so many new witnesses and fresh testimony on its journey. Yet its recorded beginnings are simple. Tinfoil. In the farmlands of the southern state of New Mexico. An area about 200 yards in diameter with bright wreckage made up of rubber strips, tin foil, a rather tough paper, and sticks. That's what farmer Mac Brazel finds on the Foster Ranch on June the 14th. So unimportant does he think it, that it isn't until July the 7th that he reports it, while visiting Roswell to sell wool. Sheriff Wilcox alerts the local field of the Army Air Force, home of the only unit in the world equipped with the atomic bomb. The field's intelligence officer, the late Jesse Marcel, and others collect remnants from the ranch and return to base. The press officer issues an excited release, quickly taken up by the local media.
The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence officer of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chavez County. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Major Jesse A. Marcel of the 509th Bomb Group Intelligence Office. Action was immediately taken, and the disc was picked up at the rancher's home. It was inspected at the Roswell Army Airfield and subsequently loaned by Major Marcel to higher headquarters.
The press release stated in essence that we had in our possession a flying disc, and that Major Marcel, our base intelligence officer, was flying it to Fort Worth to turn over to General Ramey, who was the commanding general of the 8th Air Force.
The fear is that discs are Soviet aircraft. The Air Force may be carrying a new enemy secret weapon. General Ramey seeks urgent identification. He sends for a weather expert.
I was on duty at Fort Worth in the base weather station. The phone rang and it was General Ramey. And he said, "Get your ass over here as fast as you can. If you have a car, drive over here. If you don't have a car, take the first car with keys in it and come over here or walk over here." And so I just responded, "Yes, sir," and away I went.
The weather officer recognizes the remains of unusual specialist equipment for tracking winds. A radio wind or ray wind balloon and reflector, or target.
When I got in there, the inside of the room, the general was in there, and Marcel was there assuring me that this was a flying saucer he'd picked up in New Mexico. I told him that it was a ray wind balloon and a ray wind target, and if it wasn't, I'd eat it without salt or pepper. And I said, there is no doubt in my mind what that is.
The general's photo opportunity pooh-poohs the secret weapon theory. Press and public interest drain away.
The next morning when I picked up the newspaper, I saw that we didn't have a flying disc. All we had was a weather balloon. That was the end of it. It was forgotten.
Forgotten, but gone to a better life. The journey into legend begins, a high-tech folk tale, one which for some can never be proved or disproved. Concealed by the government. They don't want us to know the secret. They have alien technology. The beans are spilt 30 years later by a chance remark to a UFO writer.
In 1978, I was at a television station, waiting for a late reporter when the manager of the station, who was giving me coffee and a little embarrassed because the reporter was late, said, "The guy you ought to talk to is Jesse Marcel." "Who's he?" "Oh, well, he handled pieces of the wreckage of one of those saucers you're interested in when he was in the military." That got my attention.
The writer's attention results in the truth coming out. What Major Marcel remembers with certainty is no aircraft, nor a weather balloon, nor a missile. It's something else. On July the 2nd, lightning strikes a spaceship over Roswell. Bits fall off nearby. The actual crash is on the plains of San Agustin, 100 miles away. There is a wreck and dead aliens. They are found by archaeologists and a soil engineer. The military arrive and make them leave. Oh, and Brazel lied. He couldn't find the debris before July the 3rd at the ranch. The material makes a deep impression on Major Marcel and on his son, then aged 11.
My first memory of that time in 1947 was being awakened by my father very late at night, maybe after midnight, maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. He said, "I have something I want to show to you." So I went out to the car to help him bring some boxes of this material in, dumped it out over the kitchen floor so we could examine it. And it turns out there was a lot of metallic debris. There's some I-beam material, some foil-like material, some black plastic debris. And he said he thinks this is part of what was then called a flying saucer. When I held one of these I-beams up to the light so the light would reflect across the inner surface, I noticed there was some writing of some kind. It looked like hieroglyphics, and it was all inside the inner surface of the I-beam itself. The symbols themselves look like geometric forms, like circles, balls, triangles, truncated pyramids, various configurations like that. Years after this event occurred, I heard my father talk of how he had people try to bend it with a sledgehammer. Even as thin material as this appeared to be, apparently it could not be dented even with a 16-pound sledgehammer. I heard my father talk about trying to burn it with a cigarette lighter, and he said it would not burn. He tried it to see if it would shrivel up like tinfoil wood under a cigarette lighter, and apparently it did not.
By mistake, or to divert attention from the site, the press release is put out. To avoid panic and hide the government's possession of alien technology, the story is covered up. The truth is out, but is it the whole truth? Where are the aliens now? And the wreckage? Is it the ultimate secret weapon? The story wins many friends. People can't stand yet another government conspiracy. In 1987, new details are leaked in hoax documents masquerading as a briefing for President-elect Eisenhower. They tell entirely different events, different time, different place. Forget the lightning. On July the 2nd, a reconnaissance saucer malfunctions. Forget San Agustin. The crash is at Corona. 2 miles away, 4 human-like aliens are found. All traces are removed. The cover-up is extensive. A call from Washington warns the local radio station to stop covering the story or be shut down. It threatens the broadcasters.
You didn't see anything, you haven't heard anything, you don't know anything about this. And let me assure you that we will monitor you to be sure every broadcast that you make, that if you mention it, you're in big trouble. And furthermore, if a report comes to us that you have violated this agreement that we have made, we will tell you that we're not going to wait for a federal communications deal with warnings and all of that stuff. That, as of that moment, we are going to cancel your license to operate.
3 versions so far and no rest for a myth on the make. Want to shift some hooks? How about a new witness, say someone who knows what happened to the aliens? Make sure you include most of the details of all previous versions. Don't forget to add a few tidbits about those space-age alien materials. There's no silence in the UFO busters. In 1991, a 4th version appears. The saucer lands briefly on the Foster Ranch on July the 2nd, takes off, gouges the ground for 150 feet, leaves wreckage. It comes to rest 2 miles away. Mac Brazel finds alien debris with almost magical properties. He shows it to his neighbors.
This piece of material that he brought, we examined it real carefully. It looked like it was a little larger than a pencil, and it was about 6 or 7 inches long. It was a light tan color, looked like a lightweight wood, but you couldn't burn it or cut it. Mac said that some of the other material looked like a aluminum foil, but when you'd crush it in your hand, it would straighten back out. There were no creases at all. And there was some tape that, or some part of it that had some printing on it. He said in a purplish pink ink. He said it wasn't like Japanese or the way he described it, it was more like hieroglyphics or something, you know, it was kind of pictures. It wasn't flowers or printing as we knew anything.
At the second site 2 miles away, 4 alien bodies and a crashed saucer are found. The military remove all traces and ring up the local undertaker come ambulance man. He's a brand new witness.
The mortuary officer from the Roswell Army Airfield called and said he would like to ask me a few questions. He wanted to know, did we have, what size baby caskets hermetically sealed? Were they 3'6" or 4 foot? He wanted to know how many that we have in stock and how long would it take us to get more.
Later, Glenn Dennis drives an injured airman out to the base in his ambulance.
When I got to the infirmary where I usually park, there was 3 old field ambulances there where I usually park. Naturally, I looked in and I saw a lot of debris there. It looked like some kind of a crash debris of some kind, not particularly an airplane crash, but it was some kind of debris. Then I noticed there was a piece that looked like the end of a canoe that was about 3.5 feet that came up to a point like a canoe, and then I noticed on the outer edges that it looked like some kind of hieroglyphics.
His emergency over, Glenn passes by the hospital laboratory.
We probably hadn't gone over 10 feet, and this door opened, and it was a nurse that I knew that I had worked with before. And she had a towel over her face, and she was gasping, I think, or maybe crying, I'm not sure, but I know she was gasping for breath. And she did see me, and she said, "Glenn Dennis, get out of here as fast as you can because you're going to get in a lot of trouble." Immediately following her were 2 gentlemen that also had a towel over their face, and they were gasping very much so. They went on across the hall with her and went into the door. It wasn't for just a few minutes, and here comes 2 MPs, and they said, "Take this gentleman off the base, and you drive him back. Don't let him drive. Make sure he's off the base, and you drive the ambulance yourself."
Dennis is removed on the orders of a menacing red-haired captain and a mean black sergeant. The next day, he meets the nurse. She's in a terrible state.
I've never seen anyone that she was as white as a ghost. Her hair was just all completely messed up. She was like scratching her face, and then she was just almost completely in total shock. Her story was that they were doing a partial autopsy. On one hospital gurney was a crash bag it was unzipped with 2 very mutilated small little bodies. It said very mutilated. And she said, for instance, there was a hand that was severed, and in a long forceps, they would turn the hand over, and they were describing it only 4 fingers, small pads on each end of the fingers, and it looks like there's little miniature suction cups.
The further it goes, the more witnesses it grows. Just when you thought it might die down, fresh versions 5 and 6, more crash sites, more aliens, and more military policemen are all on the way. 1992, the War of the Words continues. July the 8th, this time, Saucer 1 crashes 75 miles from Roswell. Dead aliens, 4. 150 miles away, a second saucer is found by archaeologists. Oh, and new witnesses. ET body count, now 7. Plus 1 who wants to phone home. New players appear. At the first sight, a menacing figure, a red-haired colonel. At the second, 2 others, a red-haired captain and a black sergeant. Surely not the ones who kicked the mortician off the base. 1994, the millennium approaches. The 4th of July, 2 Franciscans record something crashing to Earth. Independence Day at last. The truth and the saucer come closer. Not at San Agustin, nor even at Corona. The doomed disc drops down just north of Roswell's museums. It's found by archaeologists, entirely different archaeologists. Enter an incredible eyewitness. He claims a secret mission took him to the crash site itself.
We got into several Jeeps and some trucks and so on, went north, and we clipped fence and went into the area, and that's where we saw this glow. We saw this craft, and it didn't look like an airplane, didn't look like a missile, and it was something that was just odd. The craft itself was close to almost a heel shape. I would say that it might have been about 15, 20 feet in length. It was kind of half open. One body was thrown up to the base of the arroyo. The other body was half in, half out. They were well-developed individuals, maybe around 5'8", 5'9". Very small nose, small ears. The eyes were round, fully round, not big. They were good-looking people, very good-looking people. Of course, a lot of us were still in shock, you know, and in disbelief what we found.
No military records support Kaufman's story. The red-haired officer and the sergeant can't be traced. The nurse's story can't be obtained firsthand. That doesn't faze a legend. The next stage is usually a carefully preserved piece of wreckage or genuine body part. It's time for the alien freak show. Those selling film of an alleged autopsy would have us believe it's true. For legal reasons, we can't show you the original. We've reconstructed it. With the help of ex-8th Air Force Colonel Dan McGovern, using the correct camera. In combat, he filmed the original Memphis Belle. He was the first military cameraman to film on the ground at Nagasaki. Much of that film is still classified. What does he think of the film of the alleged autopsy?
Well, from my point of view, I think that the whole setup is very amateur, to say the least.
Autopsies are well lit. The patient doesn't move. The cameras of the day are capable of good focus. Yet the autopsy tape is out of focus, overexposed, in black and white. Wouldn't they use colour?
It would be standard practices. Matter of fact, colour is highly recommended for all medical procedures, performing operations, and definitely so in autopsies.
The Bell and Howell camera weighs 7 pounds. The two cameras recommended would be on mounts, as is Discovery's. Ray Santilli, who sells the film worldwide, won't do an interview with us. He won't let Dan speak to the cameraman on the phone. He won't let Kodak test a single frame of the picture. Dan's seal of approval would confirm this as the most historic film ever shot. Proof that we are not alone. Santilli's version depends on the mystery cameraman stealing secret film. Is this possible?
It would be impossible to hide 20 rolls of film, especially if it was classified. It has to be accounted for.
Santilli claims the cameraman was flown in from Washington, D.C. 1,600 miles away. Is that likely?
Each Army Air Force base had its own base photo lab. They had the capability to process film, shoot film, and take care of anything that was on that particular base.
What about the name Santilli gave for the cameraman, Jack Barnett?
Jack Barnett. Never heard of him. Jack Barnett. Never heard the name. We cameramen are a very tight lot. We knew pretty well who the cameramen were in those early days. This is not what it seems to be. It's quite a hoax, and it's a phony.
We can unmask the forensic expert who studied the so-called autopsy film for discovery, a forensic pathologist, a veteran of over 20,000 autopsies, including air crashes. This is the first dummy he's dissected.
We have what is described as an alien. That is an absolutely earth-shattering event. It has never happened before, and it's going to be a long time before it happens again.
How would he go about his first alien?
If I was doing this post-mortem, I would have released all the neck structures from the mouth onwards, and then picked up the heart and lungs, taken it to a dissecting table, and then made a dissection. Instead of which, all I saw was somebody picking up a pair of scissors with index finger and thumb, which is certainly not the way any pathologist would use it, because as you can see, it waves around like so, because you cannot guide it. Most pathologists would tend to use the thumb through one loop and the middle finger through the other loop, so that the index finger is available to guide it and steady it. What they were doing was they were just going inside, picking up an organ, snipping away almost without looking, and putting it into little trays and taking it away, almost like in a butcher's shop, basically, rather than a pathologist's mortuary. Now, it's bad enough if you were to do it in a human being whose anatomy we know reasonably well, but to do it on an alien who the first ever, I think it's almost sacrilegious for it to be done in that manner. I think on the basis of what we have seen, I'm reasonably convinced that this was not an autopsy in the ordinary sense. It was probably fabricated, if you like.
If the stuffing's been knocked out of the aliens, there are fresh contenders in the far-fetched explanation stakes. Just 2 years before, enemy balloons caused the only wartime casualties on the mainland US. The Japanese released 9,000 across the Pacific. Astonishingly, press silence prevents the enemy from learning that a single one ever reaches the US. The paper balloons drop their bombs and self-destruct, but their secret is known. One imaginative theory has a renegade commander still launching them, or worse, a new model with a kamikaze crew. The plains of New Mexico hold other secrets in 1947. V-2 rockets. German technology captured at Peenemünde is being developed. Not without mistakes. One misguided missile nearly hits a town. Unsurprisingly, one suspect is the remnants of a rogue V-2 parachute and nose cone. Wilder speculation provides grimmer candidates for the alien corpses. Monkeys used in later tests which do not survive. None of this resembles the material in General Ramey's office. Is there a simpler explanation? If a $1 million report by the Air Force is to be believed, there is. Mac Brazel's debris is inspected not by Marcel alone. The Air Force traced the silent survivor who accompanies him. His sworn testimony maintains there is nothing alien about the wreckage. Other witnesses explain the cover-up, to conceal the real purpose of the weather balloon. Alamogordo, New Mexico. the New York University Balloon Group, obscure academics, testing and refining balloons to remain at a fixed height. The sun makes ordinary balloons rise. They expand until they burst. The scientists try out new materials. To follow them, the engineers attach radar reflectors or targets.
The targets that we were using were constructed of aluminum foil laminated onto a fairly tough white paper, arranged in triangles with balsa wood stiffeners.
The expendable targets allow the balloon's height and speeds to be followed. Not all flights are recovered. One in particular stands out.
Flight number 4 was launched on June the 4th, and it was tracked by the B-17 and by the radar. It passed out of radar range, and our last information on it, as I remember, was when it was over a little New Mexican town called Arabella with another little town of Blue Water, both of which were exotic places that lodged in my memory ever after. These little towns are 20 miles or so from where the debris was picked up sometime later. The debris that was found, as it was described by the rancher, Mac Brazel, is a quite good description of how the remnants of one of our flights would have appeared after it came back to Earth and dragged across the ground.
Most people are unfamiliar with radical new materials such as neoprene and polyethylene, and post-war shortages lead to improvisation.
The manufacturer reinforced the attachment of the reflective laminate to the balsa strips with some tape that the manufacturer happened to have in his shop. And curiously enough, the tape that he had was embossed with some odd flower-like designs. There were pinkish purple abstract designs.
The reason for the security clampdown is the balloon's true purpose. Amazingly, even many of the team are kept unaware. The balloons are intended to carry microphones to listen for the first Soviet atom bomb. The operation is classified Top Secret Priority 1A. Even the project name is hidden from them, Mogul.
To be truthful, I never heard the name Project Mogul until 1992. I did know the intrinsic purpose of what we were doing, that is trying to detect Soviet nuclear explosions, but I knew none of the military classification, and I had no need to know.
So much for alien hieroglyphics and magic materials. One other thing in General Ramey's office remains to be identified, a heap of strange dark pieces. Thanks to Discovery, weatherman Irving Newton today meets Professor Moore for the first time. Together, can they complete the puzzle?
How do you do, Professor Moore? I've been looking forward to this.
I have too. Come in, let me show you what we have.
I sure would be happy to.
On our flights, we used these corner reflecting radar targets to track the balloons, and you may have seen these before. Have you seen these?
That surely looks like it, except this one is whole. The one we saw there was just in shatters.
We had 3 of these on the flight that we launched back in June that went to Arabella. And we carried them on balloons like this. We had strings of 23 of these balloons. The interesting thing here is after this neoprene gets exposed to sunlight, it darkens and discolors, and after it's been exposed to sunlight for a day or so, it gets about this dark. And after it's been 2 or 3 weeks out in the sun, it gets to be like this. Did you see this in General Ramey's office?
Absolutely. You've made a perfect explanation of the whole thing. All of this is what was in General Ramey's office. There's no doubt in my mind that that's what we saw.
There are cases where material has been found and analyzed. Vladivostok, one of the former Soviet Union's key naval ports. Not far away lies what's claimed to be the site of the crash of an alien probe. To take us there, we've enlisted the help of an expert on Russian UFOs, TV journalist George Knapp.
Well, we're on our way to Dalnogorsk, and 10 years ago, this journey wouldn't have been possible. For one thing, it's a very remote site. It's the reason we're in this commandeered military helicopter. It's the only way to get there. Plus the fact that politically 10 years ago when the crash occurred, if we had gone to Vladivostok, taken pictures of their harbor and all the military secrets there, we could have been shot or imprisoned. So this is basically the only way to get there. We're going there to find out if the crash at Dalnogorsk is the equivalent of the Russian Roswell, because it has all the elements. It has eyewitnesses, scientific testimony, UFO sightings, scientific analysis of the material. We'll see what we find out.
The crash of an unknown object in Dalnogorsk, Siberia in January 1986 raises many questions. What is the silent 2-meter sphere which flies through the area parallel to the ground? It travels at only 40 miles an hour. It can hardly be a natural phenomenon like a meteorite, a fallen satellite or rocket part. Do the traces really point to extraterrestrial technology? Are the scientific tests on the debris as conclusive as is claimed? The heavy metal works of the town are overlooked by the simply named Height 611. Witnesses observe the strange sphere fly towards the ridge. It rises and falls near the crest before crashing in flames.
It is red and orange. It changes colour at different times. When it is rising, it becomes brighter, and when it is falling, it gets darker. When it climbs, rays of light come out of it.
It happens on the 29th of January 1986. We see a strange object. It is bright yellow. It looks like the sun. It is travelling parallel to the ground. A single large beam of light comes out of it. Then it disappears over the hill.
I don't hear any explosion and I don't see any flash. Yet after it goes up and down several times, it vanishes over the hill.
A final question, what do you think it was? Any idea?
A UFO.
Subsequent searches find the impact site. Mysterious materials, balls, gauzes, netting are removed from the hillside. They remain in the hands of national science academies. Local scientists have only small samples. Over 3 years, they compile a 300-page study. Its author points to anomalous features of the case.
At the crash site, I found bits of magnetized flint and about 300 grams of different materials. After the crash at Height 611, there were many UFO sightings over Dalnogorsk. Discs, balloon shapes, single lights. It looked as though they were looking for something because they had searchlights. This searchlight was very interesting. It only lit up what it touched. It had no visible beam. Everything leads me to believe that this object was made by highly intelligent beings and was of extraterrestrial origin.
The metallic wreckage contains extraordinary levels of elements, purer than on Earth, he says. The net-like material is quartz insulation round gold wires, thinner than a human hair. What came from the sky is, he argues, not something made here, but part of the guidance system of an extraterrestrial probe. No other Russian researchers have published their findings or released any of the material. This is one secret Moscow could share with the scientific community. Before it becomes a myth, we could have an answer.
Unlike most UFO cases, this one should be and can be resolved. Russian institutes have sequestered the Dalnogorsk debris for more than 10 years. The world has been told the object was of terrestrial origin. But where are the reports? And more importantly, where is the debris itself? The only scientific analysis released to date suggests the object, whatever it was made somewhere else and is perhaps not of this world.
It's not a landing on the White House lawn. It's the next best thing. At RAF Bentwaters, Woodbridge, Suffolk, England, home to American tank busters. In December 1980, US Air Force personnel encounter a touchdown of a different kind. An internal US Air Force memo confirms the incident. Its author is writing from first-hand experience.
In 1980, I was assigned to RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge. It was a combination twin base complex. I was assigned as the deputy base commander. On the evening of the 29th of December, we were having the Combat Support Group Christmas party. We'd just finished dinner when the police lieutenant on duty came in just white as a sheet and said, "I've got to talk to you and the base commander right now." And he said, "It's back." We looked at each other and looked at him and said, "What's back?" He said, "You know, the UFO, it's back."
3 days beforehand, there is a sighting witnessed by many security police.
We crossed Bentwaters and out the back gate to the Woodbridge base. We proceeded on into the forest to the area where this supposed landing had taken place several nights earlier. There were 3 indentations in the forest, equal distance apart. So I had the disaster preparedness NCO start to take readings. While we were in the process of getting readings, which by the way came out much higher than background radiation, somebody noticed something in the forest, a light. The light was bright like the sun. It was glowing, but it had a dark center, and it appeared to have something dripping off it like molten metal. The light was about 15 or 20 degrees off to our left, almost directly in front of a farmer's field. As we approached the fence, the edge of the field, and were watching this object, it suddenly exploded. Now, there was never a sound the whole time. It burst suddenly into 5 objects, 5 white objects, and disappeared. And at that time, we noticed there were several objects in the sky, 2 to the north and 1 to the south. They were brightly lit, multicolored, and they were moving very rapidly together as though they were in formation. We watched them for several minutes, and they kept doing this. We turned and watched the object to the south, and suddenly it came toward us at very high speed. It stopped and sent down a beam like a laser beam. It fell right at our feet. It stayed on for several seconds, and just like a flashlight, it clicked off. Managed to get a bit of communication through to the command post and asked them to check with Eastern Radar, who had air defense for that sector. They came back and said no, they weren't painting anything on the screen, but they couldn't explain and wouldn't say a whole lot more. I never saw anything as far as an alien being or anything could be considered human or humanoid or anything of that nature, although I had a distinct feeling, in fact, I'm firmly convinced that the objects we saw were under some type of intelligent control.
3 days earlier, patrolmen make physical contact with a UFO.
I was called at the Chow Hall to go out to the East Gate. It was about 12 o'clock at night, and I proceeded out there. When I arrived there, there was 2 police units there. They were pointing over into the wooded area, about 300 yards approximately off the East Gate. We seen a glowing white light with some yellow and some blue in it. It was, the closer we got, the more intense the bright white light emanated out of it. We got to the edge of the forest, and it was bright enough to make you squint. We were approximately about 60, 70 yards away from the craft. As I got maybe within 10 meters of the craft, it was apparent that there was no aircraft that I've seen. It was triangular in shape, like a pyramid, about 9 feet by 9 feet by 9 feet, approximately about 6, 7 feet tall. The fabric of the craft was a very smooth, black glass-type fabric. Underneath the craft, there was what appeared to be some type of landing struts or landing gear, and they left a triangle impression in the ground. The colors that were still moderately covering the edges of it were red, blue, and yellow. As I proceed up to the craft and got beside of it, I noticed a writing of some sort or description of some sort on the side of the craft. Undecipherable. I didn't know what it was. The craft itself was warm. I observed the craft probably for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes on the ground, checking it out, encircling it. Then about 15 minutes later, the craft started moving back towards the trees and the woods, back through the woods. And it probably went back probably about 200 feet. We never really got really close to it again. The craft raised up through the trees, and in a blink of an eye, it was gone. What I seen was a controlled aircraft that could fly. Made no sound, and was able to go ahead and maneuver back through the woods and be able to take off in a blink of an eye. That's what I seen. Do we have the capability in the United States Air Force? No. Does anybody else in the world? Not as far as I know of.
Alien craft or terrestrial cover-ups? Products of distant planets or of our own imagination? Time for science to bring the answers down to Earth?